So Larry, I have a question.
Yeah? What's that?
Why don't I see more ID.4s? Why don't people have these great cars in their driveways?
Well, we just did a video about how much we loved ours. That's a great question. Let's answer that next on Every Mile.
So I think there are a few reasons. And probably one big reason is that Volkswagen stopped production in 2024. Why was that?
Yeah, so there were several recalls, including on our car. The biggest one that caused the stopping of the production here in the U.S. at their Chattanooga, Tennessee plant was they had an issue with the door handles, the exterior door handles that caused clicking, and basically not only could they not produce cars, but they actually had to stop sale. So they couldn't even sell the cars they had on the lot, and they didn't have a fix. So I don't know exactly how long that was, but it seemed like it was several months. We're in the beginning of 2025 now, but it was definitely several months where they could neither produce nor sell the Volkswagen ID.4.
So obviously, if they're not making them and they're not available, people aren't able to buy them, and that, of course, contributes to all of that. Yeah, it doesn't exactly inspire confidence as a buyer either.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true, and I think the Chevy Bolt had the same issue. You know, there was an issue, much more severe, to be clear, when the batteries were catching fire. That's not been the case with the ID.4, but it doesn't help the brand.
Right.
That you see, okay, recall after recall after recall. Again, we've had those. We still love our car. We just did a video, we'll link to that, talking about our 30,000 mile experience.
This is the first VW that I've owned. Previously, I owned a Nissan and I owned a Subaru. So I can't say that I'm deeply brand loyal, but I guess I'm wondering, for those people who maybe are brand loyal, how much of an impact did dieselgate have on VW ownership in general? And do people have maybe a bad impression of VW because of that?
You know, that's a good question, and the only reason we're sitting in an electric VW is because of Dieselgate. So Dieselgate was when VW decided that they would cheat on emissions. So basically, long story short, diesel vehicles that VW produced were fine and dandy, met all the standards when they were hooked up to a dynamometer or an emissions check. In other words, they had a defeat device. But the 99, any other time you're driving around like a normal person, it would not meet those standards. And so they were severely fined. That's actually what created Electrify America as well, money from that. So they obviously stopped producing diesels altogether. In fact, had to destroy a lot of them. And then, committed to zero emissions vehicles, including the ID.4. So that's sort of how we got here. Well, the first thing, honestly, that comes to mind for me when I think of the ID.4 is the software woes. I know the first one we drove test drove in 2021. We both agreed that the touch screen here was so slow as to be unusable. Very frustrating.
It was very laggy. And so if you were someone who considered an ID.4 and we're looking at that first generation in the 2021 models, you probably need to give them another look, because they have greatly improved the interface and the infotainment, the screen. We have never experienced that lagginess,
correct,
and that slowness that was a problem in the 2021 models.
Yeah, so we have a 2023. It's definitely not perfect in that regard, but it does a pretty good job. And I think it's also worth noting that the 2024s have continued that advancement. They have a bigger screen, at least on the, if you get the long range, a bigger screen, and a completely different system that is even faster, that is more responsive, that everyone's, you still might not like the functionality, but it works the way it's intended, which I think is even better than what we have, which ours is fine.
Aren't ID.4s way more expensive than other comparable vehicles?
So that, I don't know. They definitely are from the MSRP standpoint. If you look on Volkswagen's site, but if you look at what dealers are offering, the money. I mean, what's basically happened? All these cars are basically the same price. So if you look at the ID.4 Pro S, like rear-wheel drive, against the Model Y, rear-wheel drive long range, against the ID.4, the EV6. I didn't look as much as at the Mach-E, but they're probably the same price
the
as well.
Ioniq 5,
Ioniq 5.
the Equinox.
Yeah, so they're all, when you start getting into the long range variants, basically in the same price. Equinox might be cheaper. So I don't think it's a price thing.
But it would be understandable if you had that impression and hadn't dug a little deeper to figure out that all these manufacturers came to play. And they've they're taking money off of sticker to make themselves more competitive. And I guess it's time to go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room.
Well, the elephant in the room is a Tesla Model Y, which is, depending on, I guess, the month or whatever, is claimed to be the best-selling car in the world. Now, it's certainly the best-selling EV. There's no, by a long, long, long stretch here in the U.S., and that was true in 2024 for sure. So now the one thing that I will, if you've seen my video, I sold my Tesla Model 3. Stay tuned. That's still coming, my replacement car. But, you could say anything you want about Tesla. You can say anything you want about the Model Y. But the way you buy a car from Tesla is about the best way you can do it. And it is, exactly what the price of the car is by going to the website. I mean, it's the same for everybody. That price is locked in when you order it. They've had incentives lately, including 0% financing. And if you use a referral for a Tesla, that you get money off. So I don't know. I always really appreciated that transparency and really not having to deal with the dealers, which kind of sets them completely apart from that other experience. So what is the actual, you don't really know, like what's an advertisement, they say in the law, right? It's an invitation to negotiate. So you have to go to the dealers on all these others to really, and there's good dealers, don't get me wrong. We've enjoyed working with our local VW dealer, but it's a different thing. I think it's really hard just to look at something online and know exactly where you stand, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely right. They have revolutionized the car buying process.
And they do have more range. I think that's important to point out. The Model Y, particularly now that they have the long range rear-wheel drive, it has more range. And those numbers are more accurate than they used to be because the EPA is being more strict on those numbers. So that's one thing. The other thing, I don't think you can talk about EVs without talking about range anxiety, and charging anxiety. I think the Supercharger network can't be overstated. If you go on road trips, a lot of people don't. If you can charge at home, it doesn't matter. And let's keep in mind that GM, as of this recording, GM, Ford, Volvo, is it Polestars? Well, anyway, there's several brands. Not everyone yet can have get an adapter and use the supercharger. Almost all, not all, but almost all of the superchargers. So that's beginning to be less, in my view, less and less of an issue. But not everyone likes Tesla or the Model Y. They don't ride great. I like the Model 3. I think it looks better. That's obviously subjective, but I don't know that I would. I mean, it's practical, but it's not my.
I understand it. I mean, on paper, I get it. The Model Y has a lot to recommend it, but people don't always make the most logical choices. I think car buying is nuanced, and it's there's an emotional component to it as well, which I guess kind of brings me back to people follow trends, right? And if they see things repeatedly, they start to take notice of those. And so just the sheer number of Model Ys that are on the road. People see them. They, everywhere they go, there's one there. And so if you are considering an EV, it's easy to say, oh, well, I see those everywhere. They must be great, right? Like this is familiarity.
Well, and you probably know someone who has one.
Right.
I mean, just to be honest, I mean, where we live, we see them all the time. I mean, they're in our neighborhood. There's a couple running around here. Yeah, I mean, and they are I joke with a buddy of mine. They're the Camry of our generation. When we were coming up, everyone had a Camry. Yeah. Well, everyone has a Model Y now, and there's there's a reason for that. You're not going to hear from us that that's not to not get one or that it's not a good choice, but it certainly isn't for everybody, and there's lots of good options out there, including the ID.4, of course.
I really love my ID.4, and I wish I saw more of them because I think they're great. And the people in our lives who have had the opportunity to have one or lease one, they too love their ID.4s. And so I don't think I've interacted with anyone who didn't like their ID.4. So it's one of those things where I think if people gave it a chance, they too would fall in love with it. So I want to hear from you. If you have an ID.4, what do you think about it? Tell us in the comments. Do you too love it, or have you had some issues with it? If you chose something else, tell us about that as well. Why did you choose what you chose? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and I think it's worth just spending a minute talking about what the new features are in 2024, because I think it's really, really important, because they made some big improvements. If you haven't figured out yet, on our channel we do some road trips. It's just something we're a sucker for the Great American Road Trip, and we take our cars on across the country. We have a family in Tennessee, and we've been all over in our Tesla and in this car. If you road trip a car, you need on-route battery preconditioning. This 2023 car does not have it. When you're DC fast charging, it makes your fast charging experience, particularly in the winter, much more palatable, much faster. So the 2024s do have that. We've talked about the entertainment. The screen is bigger. You have ventilated seats, more range. If you get the long range car, you're up to right at 300 miles now. It's interesting too because the motors now have more power. Who doesn't want more power? But the important part of that is you can get the rear wheel drive. Before, we wouldn't consider the rear wheel drive. We drove it and it just wasn't enough power. I mean, not that we're, speed racers or, we race people at every single stoplight, allegedly. But having that adequate power from the rear wheel drive means you can go without the front motor and get the most range. And I do really like that Volkswagen has continued to offer, the Pro S in rear wheel drive or, 4-wheel drive. And there's a smaller battery. There's almost one for everybody. The top of the line doesn't exist anymore. The Pro S Plus is no longer produced here in North America. So those are really the top line things that have changed. They'd had still inexplicably, they do not, and that's really my issue with them, is they do not, at least in the U.S., have the option for a heat pump. And then we're here in Southwest Ohio. We have winter. We want to go on road trips in winter. Using the heater, which is a resistive element heater, it's great. The heat's great. You will be warm and comfortable, but it will use a substantial amount of energy to do so. So I would encourage you there's been two friends of ours who've gotten ID.4s based on our ownership here with ours, and they love theirs. So, we're not here to sell cars. We just want to give you the information and then let you make that decision. But we've enjoyed ours.
Absolutely. So as much as we have loved the 2023, sounds like the 2024s are even better. So as production ramps back up, keep those in mind.
Yeah, and check out the lease deals. We just saw a lease deal that was, how much was that for the standard range? $150 a month?
I don't remember.
Anyway, check out the lease deals. If that's something that works for you, maybe we'll see more ID.4s on the road in 2025.
I hope so.
Well, if you like what we're doing here, we really would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, where we're trying to build our subscribers, and give us a thumbs up, because that lets YouTube and the algorithm know that you like what we're doing, and we will see you on the next one.